Welcome, friends and listeners, to American Freedom Radio, lovers of truth and light. You're with Santos Bonacci. It's the 20th of March here in Melbourne, 1 p.m, and beautiful, glorious, sunshiny day. Obviously, here we are in the fall, in autumn. So, but you've got your spring coming up in the Northern Hemisphere. Wonderful. Beautiful. Tomorrow for us is the equinox, the day of balance, and, today's guest will be quite appropriate for the days that we're living in. As I promised yesterday, as I announced, today's guest is one of the most respected and long-timers in the movement for freedom and truth and consciousness and love, etc., but just truth, facts. And to follow from yesterday's interview with Dean Clifford, I'm really proud to announce that I have special guest today, Winston Shrout. Welcome to the show, Winston.
Well, hello there. I can hear you loud and clear.
Lovely, lovely. And welcome. The listeners have been excited and anticipating this interview. I've been advertising it for, since we approached you probably 6 weeks ago now, Winston. So thanks for accepting. Thank you very much.
Well, always happy to speak and spread whatever information we have to share. So I'm very happy and honored that you would even ask me.
Yep. Well, I've noticed that already. I've noticed that you are willing and make yourself available. So we are delighted to have you here on American Freedom Radio. Now, I don't have any specific things that, I want to direct you on, because I've followed your work for 5 or 6 years. I've done all the Accepted for Values and all of that stuff, and so I'm very, very familiar with your work. I know what you're doing behind the scenes. Your interview with David Wilcock there, explaining the work that you're doing to bring the troublemakers to, responsibility and so forth. So we can talk about that. I'm happy to talk about that. But anything that's that you want to share, please do, Winston. So I really don't know where to begin, to be quite honest. There's so much that you deal with, and it's all...
Could you perhaps give me an idea of what your listeners are asking about? Perhaps we can key off, some of those items, if that would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, perhaps we can start then with following through with the interview that you did with David Wilcock about perhaps the actions coming up against the likes of the Federal Reserve, which you announced have not renewed their contract. So where are they? What are they doing? Why do they still have a presence in our society? And how do we get back on track in terms of getting the treasuries to print real money for us, etc.?
Okay. Well, maybe I should give some background information that might be helpful, and it has to do with, the international, in respect to the Federal Reserve notes. The Federal Reserve system was actually a system that was anticipated way back in the early 1900s. It was, in fact, part of a master plan. However, it appears that the master plan kind of went askew a bit. In any event, we had all those things coming online. And so, in any event, coming down to our present time, more or less, and the impact of that, what most people perhaps are not aware of is that the Federal Reserve notes are an international currency. The United States apparently is the only country on the planet that does not have its own national currency. And so anytime any transaction transpires within the United States, with that involves Federal Reserve notes, or what's referred to as U.S. dollars, it's actually an international transaction. And so I think maybe that might help people to conceptualize the situation as it is. Now, I'm not sure what year it was, but at some point it was decided that the Federal Reserve note would, in fact, be the reserve currency on the planet, and I believe it replaced the British pound sterling as the reserve currency. Now, what that means is that all the currencies on the planet are measured against the value of the U.S. dollar or the Federal Reserve note. Now, as has been mentioned, the charter for the Federal Reserve Bank ran out, and it was decided that the charter would not be renewed. Now, what that meant was that the Federal Reserve Bank itself would no longer function in the capacity of a central bank. Now, it appears that the function that was formerly performed by the Federal Reserve System, Federal Reserve banks, has been absorbed into the United States Treasury. And perhaps I should make one slight definition here. Do not confuse the United States Treasury with the United States Department of Treasury. Formerly, the United States Department of Treasury was a cabinet position within the government of the United States, but for purposes which became apparent later on, in 1920, the United States Department of Treasury was removed out of the U.S. government and became what is known now as the International Monetary Fund. So in any event, when people start to think about the structure of the finances in the United States, then do not make the mistake of thinking that the U.S. Treasury is the same thing as the U.S. Department of Treasury. They're two separate entities, although there's a certain amount of interlocking functions and so forth. Now, one of the things that has been contemplated, and I think Keith Scott would be a good one to address this, but what has been anticipated would be that the privately owned central banks would become nationalized. Now, what that would do would bring the central banks under the control of their respective governments, the purpose of which is to recapitalize the national treasuries of the various countries and therefore gain the control of the printing of their currencies and of their money and so forth. Now, that would be a great boon to the planet as that can be accomplished, and certainly with the demise of the central bank known as the Federal Reserve Bank at this point, perhaps we can expect a domino effect. At least I have my fingers crossed. So that's kind of maybe a kickoff there that might spur some thought.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and it's mind-boggling. Now, just for my mind and the listeners that may not be so au fait with Department of Treasury and the Treasury. Now, the Department of Treasury, you said, is a cabinet position. Is that right?
It was. Until 1920.
Right. And so, in my mind, the Treasury is the authentic printing press of the people by the people. Am I correct?
It should be, yes, indeed.
Right, and the Department of Treasury is, what, another corporation attached to that somehow?
No, actually, the U.S. Department of Treasury is actually, you could say that it is the IMF, but it's not quite. But it is a part of the international. It is not a function of the U.S. government at this point.
Right, exactly. Now I can understand it. Pretty much like the English believe that the Bank of England is a bank for the people, of the people, by the people, but the major shareholders are privateers.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so because
go ahead.
it was... Continue, sorry.
No, I'm just interjecting that the goal that we're trying to get to is to have all of the central banks in all of the countries to become nationalized and under the control of their respective government. That's the goal here.
Absolutely, and I can see the sanity and the good sense in that. Why should some foreign entity control a country's currency? And, of course, we have the famous quote by the Rothschild dynasty founder who said, "Let me just control the currency. I don't care who runs the place. I just want to control the money." And so they're still at it.
Yeah. And also, I think, to factor in to the situation here internationally on the financial scene are the Basel agreements. Now, the Basel III agreement is in effect, and that is what has taken the power away from the cabal and the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and so forth, on the basis that their accounts must become transparent. Now, once the transparency is enforced on these entities, and actually all of the banks, it will be determined where their money came from. Now, as Keith has pointed out, much of this book money has been created by mirroring the collateral accounts, which is illegal. So therefore, if Basel III requires the banks and so forth to become transparent and to reveal where their money came from, and if it's found out that that money was created illegally by trading on the collateral accounts, then those assets, as it were, will be taken and removed off of the books. So we see a great deal happening with that, with that concept.
Wow. And Keith, of course, is one of your colleagues that you're working with, I gather.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Like who? Say that again. I didn't quite hear that last part.
Keith, he is one of your colleagues with whom you are working to perhaps establish the treasuries printing their own money.
Yes. I think Keith is probably the most knowledgeable man on the planet when it comes to the international finance and how it could be corrected. Now, Keith basically works behind the scenes in a certain capacity to cause these things to transpire, and certainly he has a major input into solving the problems.
Exactly. Now, I've heard about the process, how you've leaned in the private under common law jurisdiction, or at least the correct jurisdiction, how you have leaned these entities. What sort of effects has that had so far, Winston?
Well, actually, I was just speaking with Keith perhaps last week, and we were discussing that very subject. And he was not prepared to reveal to me exactly the conversation that he had. But he that very day had a conversation over lunch with an individual who would certainly know, but this individual had revealed to Keith that these commercial liens have, in fact, had a major impact on the international banking community. Now, exactly what that impact is, I can't say because I didn't get into that with him. But yes, indeed, those commercial liens have, in fact, had a strong influence, let's put it that way, a strong influence on how things are looked at in that commercial world.
Very encouraging, absolutely very encouraging. Now, the Federal Bank, you have explained this in your interviews, and it's beautifully explained, how the Federal Reserve, when it was enacted, did have a clause in their contract or a condition in their contract whereby they were supposed to make 4% payments, which they have never done.
Correct.
And
yes, when the contract was first created as a part of the contract for the use of the gold, the Federal Reserve Bank guaranteed a 4% annual fee. Now, that's not interest; that's a fee for the use of that gold, and that 4% to date has never been met. Now, that was the basis of that first lien that Keith created against
Winston, brother, let me stop you there. The music's on, which means we're going to a break. Hold the thought. We're talking about the lien, and just hang on to that thought, and we'll go to a break back in a few short minutes. Hang in there, listeners. Thank you. Welcome back, folks. You're on American Freedom Radio, and we have very special guest, Winston Shrout. I know many of you are so excited about this, and we are thankful to have Winston, and the subject is hotting up. So, Winston, if you can remember the thought before the break, the liens.
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
We were discussing the contract that was made between the owners of the gold and the Federal Reserve banks. And so the contract itself called for a 4% fee per annum for the use of the gold, which was never forwarded to the owners of the gold. Now, so when Keith and I were contemplating what could be done in this particular situation, I had him to go back and review that contract because he did have a copy of it on his computer. And so we reviewed that because I asked him to look and see specifically how that fee was to be paid. So he looked at the contract and he said it does not specify how that 4% is to be paid. So I said, good. So I said, what we will do is what's known as an election of remedies. Since it was not specified in regards to the 4%, we will demand the 4% to be paid in gold. Now, that might sound like an impossibility, and actually it is sort of a catch-22 because we calculated the accumulation of the 4% starting in 1961. Now, there was some reason for that that Keith knew that I don't know. But in any event, he said we'll calculate that beginning in 1961, which at that time I think amounted to 51 or 52 years. Now, the accumulation of that period of time added up to twice the amount of gold that was originally contracted for. Now, that technically is an impossible situation for the Federal Reserve Bank. But again, there was a purpose, for doing all of this. So anyway, at that point, Keith went ahead and created and gave notice and so forth to the Federal Reserve banks of that lien, and then he went forward and basically did similar things, but under different circumstances, to the other central banks of Europe and Asia, in particular those who had been mirroring illegally the gold, what we basically refer to as the collateral accounts. So at that point, those things were put into place. It was known across the planet that it had been done. And again, the stated purpose for doing those things was not to destroy the system, but to correct the system. And so apparently by this date, it has had a major impact on that community. And, that was the effect that was wanted when this project was started, was basically to wake up, those entities and say, hey, guys, enough's enough. Now, let me say, in defense of the present operators of those banks, that they inherited a nightmare. In other words, the parties now at present who are having to operate those facilities are many generations removed from the original ones who got that whole thing started. So again, there's no intent, for destruction of that situation, but rather, to open the eyes of those who are presently responsible for those institutions and say, hey, time to wake up. You inherited a problem. We feel sorry for that, but there's a better way to do this. And we have some suggestions if you'll take our suggestions that might enhance, the job that you have. So that was the intent of it.
Beautiful. To correct it. Now, where is the gold? So they took off with the gold and didn't pay the 4% use rate. And so have they still got the gold, or where is it?
No, the gold itself is safely deposited. Basically, almost all of it is still deposited in, I guess you would say, Asia Minor.
Asia Minor, Turkey.
No, that's the wrong word. Southeast Asia, that's the right word.
Southeast Asia. Oh, Indonesia and all of that. Yeah, right.
Yes. Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia perhaps, Vietnam, Philippines, in that area there. And all of the gold is accounted for, and that gold is in the accounts which presently comprise the Sukarno Trust. Now that's an interesting concept, and there's a lot of history behind that. At this point, Keith himself is one of the settlors on that trust, and so he has been put in that position certainly because of his ability and trustworthiness, and so he works quietly behind the scenes, developing things and meeting with people, making suggestions and so forth as to how the system might be corrected, and he does it from a position of power.
Exactly. Look, I had Dean Clifford on yesterday, Winston, who deeply respects you and all the other, well, let's call them sovereigns for now. There's great respect for what you're doing, and he mentioned the same thing. The system's okay. It's a system. That's all it is. It just needs to be corrected because parasitic entities have hijacked the system, and they benefit from it, and we, the people, do not. So that just simply needs to be corrected.
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the premises that I've operated on since I started lecturing under the the name of Winston Shrout Solutions in Commerce, and that is that we have a system, and I dare say there's very few people on the planet that could create a better system than that. The only problem that we run into is when we have those who are operating that system who, through lack of education, knowledge, or for just downright meanness, do not operate it correctly. And so what we've tried to do is to educate the people in regards to what the system is and how to properly function within it. And I think we make some headway with that. One of the things that that I feel deep down inside is that we have affected the collective consciousness of the people. Perhaps you're familiar with a theory called the 100th monkey.
Yep.
Yeah. So based on that concept, then I would have to say that we have had a major impact on the collective consciousness, which has assisted in the present, what people are calling ascension, if you want to call it that. But what we've done is help to open up the minds of people so that they can elevate their thought process and to perhaps increase their vibrational frequency so they can see other things as well. One of the first things that I recognized when I first started with Solutions in Commerce was that the people were grossly involved in debt. And I knew from my study of scriptures, theology, and so forth, I knew that debt and sin were basically the same concept. And so one of the things, that I've labored to do is to help the people learn how to alleviate the debt using the system as it was properly designed, and to remove that burden from their shoulders so they could look at higher principles, so to speak.
Exactly. Now, look, I think we've satisfactorily exhausted that subject. Now, sure. I've got a question that you probably may not want to deal with because it's it's connected, but you may not be able to provide sort of substantial information and authoritative opinion or your own knowledge of Glass-Steagall. I wanted to ask you, how can Glass-Steagall help or not help? Because there is a big group you probably are aware of that are suggesting that we should implement Glass-Steagall. I believe it was Bill Clinton that removed it, and I believe it was Roosevelt who implemented it. So can you talk on that?
Actually, if you had mentioned it beforehand, I would be prepared to speak to that subject.
Yeah. Thought so. It's a big one.
Yeah, well, I'd have to go back and because I had not thought about Glass-Steagall for a long time, so I'm not prepared to address that at this particular time, but perhaps another time. But if you want to talk about the principles involved with that, certainly I can discuss principles.
Oh, well, please, could you do that? Yes.
Well, then you'll have to refresh me what it was all about.
All right. Well, how can Glass-Steagall help? Because it was implemented in the late 30s, I believe, to protect us from this sort of corruption that is going on. And then, of course, I think it was Bill Clinton in the late 90s that removed that protection of Glass-Steagall.
Okay. Well, without going into the details of the actual act itself and the things that have been done with it, let me make this umbrella concept here. And that is, number one, that people should not rely upon the government basically for anything. Now, what that means is that things like Glass-Steagall Glass-Steagall, whoever it is, or any other act by the government only applies to the government itself. Now, what has happened is that the people have been drawn in to the point that their status is considered to be U.S. citizens. And it's the same in every country, whereas the people have become citizens, and their status at that point puts them under basically a government. They appear as a government employee. Now, that is what is causing the control of the governments, all of which are only corporations. But anyway, it is that relationship that has caused people to come under the control of the corporate government. Now, people are not naturally that. I think perhaps you'd use the word sovereign and so forth. We use words like de jure, de facto, and some of those terms to describe various statuses. But in regards to any act of government and so forth, remember, it only applies to that corporation. It does not apply to people, only as they are drawn in by adhesion contracts, implied contracts. So, I mean, if you stop for a minute and just think, from a common sense point of view, why would you want to participate in that? Now, the fact of the matter is that if the people, and again, it is the people who are the source of all wealth on the planet. So if the people decided we are no longer going to support that corporation, basically the corporation to starve to death and go away. Now, as an example, some years ago I had a friend, and he told me the following story. He had been fighting along with some problems with the IRS, and so he had been trying to get rid of the Social Security number. Now, most people might not know this, but what you're calling the Social Security number...
Just one moment, Winston. We've got the music in the background, so let's just go to the break. So the SIN number, we're going to get to that after the break, folks. Hang in there. We're with special guest Winston Shrout. Thank you. Welcome back, folks. We are here with special guest Winston Shrout on American Freedom Radio. And Winston, before we go on with the subject of the security numbers, Social Security numbers, just a question for you. Are you happy to throw the call lines open in the second hour?
Sure, I'm up for it.
Good. And another question. I do have a good friend and a well-known, okay, I'll use the word sovereign again. I think we need to reclaim that word, that I would love to join us in the second hour. Would you be into that?
Yeah, matter of fact, I was just speaking with Dean earlier today, so yeah, I'm up for that.
Okay, well, I'm going to surprise you as to who it is, but you'll be delighted. Or have you got an inkling of who it is?
I think I have an inkling, yeah.
Oh, dang, I was going to surprise you. Okay, well, he's going to join us in the well, he's going to join... Okay, so, all right, back to the SIN then.
Okay, let me start off this conversation just a little bit differently before I get into some of the particulars, because I have been going in a certain direction, but I think I need to interrupt that direction with some comments. And that is, it has to do with the function, the proper function of the IRS, or what's known as the Internal Revenue Service. A lot of people are not aware that the Internal Revenue Service is actually connected directly to the International Monetary Fund, and which is connected directly to the United Nations. Now, so once you know who they are, then perhaps it's a little bit easier to understand the concept of why they are in place and what should be the effect of their function. It is necessary. The IRS is a necessary function for the purpose basically of control of the corporations. Now, you might look at that concept sort of as a hedge against fascism. Without that IRS and the taxing functions and so forth, basically the corporations would run wild. I mean, we have, certain laws that, in regards to corporations and so forth, all of which, or none of which are being abided by, certainly in the United States, and I suspect other countries as well. So the concept of the IRS, should be looked at from that direction. Now, since all of the governments have become corporate in nature and in fact, then you see the importance of that regulation in that respect. Now, so the question gets to be, is the IRS fulfilling its mandates in regards to that? And I would say probably yes, but you have to factor in some other things which people perhaps are not aware of. Now, so let me continue with that caveat in mind. Let me continue on with some of the things that we had been working toward before that last break, and that is one of the things that has. Well, let me give you an example first off. A friend of mine who had been struggling to deal with the IRS situations had tried to get rid of the Social Security number. Now, let me interject here, but the Social Security number is not issued by the Social Security Administration. That number comes through the IRS via IMF and UN, and so that's where it comes from. So in any event, my friend was trying to get rid of his, as it were, Social Security number, and so finally he was talking to a agent for the IRS complaining about that situation. And the IRS agent spoke the truth to him when he said, "That's not your number. That's our number. And if you don't want the headaches involved with it, stop using our number." And so he stopped using their number, and the headaches went away.
Wow.
But in any event, people have to realize just exactly the situation in regards to those things. Now let me address how the people are being regulated as corporations, and it has to do with the birth certificate. Now, when children are brought onto this planet, when they breathe the breath of life, then it is considered by the state, and when I say state, I'm talking about the various governments and so forth, it is considered by the state that the parents are incompetent to take care of that child. And so they go to work to try to provide a situation, for that new entity. And so at the hospital or other places, there is an application made by the parents, primarily the mother, as an application for a live birth. Now, as I've mentioned, you can either spell birth B-I-R-T-H, or you can spell it B-E-R-T-H, which might give people a little bit better understanding of what's being done here. But in any event, when that application for the live birth is created, that sets up something that's referred to as a foreign situs trust. Now, based on that application, it goes through the various commercial functions of the government. Eventually, that ends up in the Depository Trust Company in New York. Now, the Depository Trust Company, the DTC, has the control of all the birth certificates on the planet, and let me explain that. Now, when after that application for live birth has been created, at least here in the United States, the state registrar will create a birth certificate. Now, I want to discuss the concept of a birth certificate from another angle, and that other angle, which will explain what I had started out to explain, that birth certificate would best be conceived of as a death certificate. Now, the reason why I say that birth certificate is actually a death certificate is because of the way that the entity is described on that instrument, and that is the name itself of the child is written in all capital letters. Now, the significance of that is, if you go to the United States Styles Manual, where it describes our style of language and how it's perceived and so forth, it will tell you that anything that is written in all capital letters is either a U.S. vessel, a corporation, or a dead person, you see. So, on the application for live birth, the name is spelled with upper and lowercase letters, but on the birth certificate, it is styled in all uppercase letters, signifying that is a death certificate, and it is the first assumption of death that is produced. Now, this is a very significant thing for people to look at, because, again, the birth certificate, the birth certificate is the first assumption that the entity is a decedent, you see. Now, so most of the things that are generated out here in the public or with the governments and so forth are based upon that assumption. Now, that assumption is something that's very significant and must be overcome if someone is to operate as a man or a woman, or as some people like to say, a sovereign. Now, I myself don't like to use the word sovereign in particular. I refer to myself as a man because that's the only thing I can prove.
Exactly.
Or a woman.
Exactly.
You understand?
Yep.
I can biologically prove that, but I can't prove that I'm a sovereign, even though I act like one. You see what I mean? So
exactly.
Yeah. So once we find ourselves in that predicament, trying to live based upon an assumption, then we fall into these other problems, adhesion contracts, and all these kind of things that we seem to get embroiled in. Uh-oh. Is that another break?
Yep, we're going to a break there, Winston. There's the music. I'm sorry about that, because you were just getting into some really interesting stuff. Please let's carry over this thought after the break. Folks, if you want to call in and ask Winston a question, the caller lines are open in a few minutes. So please call in, feel free, and ask Winston a question. So off to a break, back in a few short minutes. Yes, like a little toy, and the world is no one's little toy. Welcome back, folks. We're with Winston Shrout. Winston, if you don't mind, we can continue with the thought from before, and then we'll go to callers. And our
let me
friend...
finish up that thought. Go ahead.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, let me finish up that thought process, maybe another 5 or 6 minutes so I can have that wrapped up, and then if you want to entertain some questions, we can do that as well.
Yep.
What we were driving at was basically the assumption that you're dead. And I gave several of the qualifiers that indicated that, principally being the birth certificate being actually a death certificate. And, for those who want to prove that point, just go out to the cemetery, and you'll notice that on the tombstones, that all of the names there are shown to be exactly created in the same way that the birth certificate is. In other words, all of the names there in the cemetery are all in capital letters. So the birth certificate basically is the tombstone. So in any event, once you understand that, there are certain other things that I need to bring up here, which would further help people to understand how they are perceived and what their status is when they operate under that assumption of death. Now, as I mentioned, here in the United States, and I'm sure it's very similar in the other countries, for instance, in my home state of Kentucky, actually it's a commonwealth, which has certain implications to it, but in any event, the state registrar was the party who created the birth certificate. Now, all right. Now, to further that, that in itself won't cause you any harm, but when young people and old people as well are induced to believe that they need to have a Social Security account, then they sign an application for that account. Here in the United States, it's called an SS-5 form. And when they sign that with an unqualified signature, then that gives general jurisdiction on that signature. Now, there's quite a bit of technology involved with general and limited type jurisdictions by the way we put our autograph onto documents. Of course, that's perhaps a story for another day. But now when you affix your signature or autograph to that document, you are setting up a Sesta KV trust. And we don't have time to go into all the ramifications of a Sesta KV. But in any event, because of your signature on that document, you are construed to be the trustee and surety for the resulting trust, which is in fact a Sesta KV. You are not the beneficiary. You're construed to be the surety and trustee. Now, we have in fact developed technologies to deal with that. And at some point, we might go over that, but certainly I have produced that technology about how to turn that Sesta KV into an express trust as the settler on that trust, and then to work from that. But in any event, I wanted to go into this concept here real quick of the results of acting like a U.S. citizen. Notice I use the word act like. Now, here in the United States, after what was called the Civil War, there was an amendment made, whether it was ratified properly or not, we act like it was. So in consequence, we bring it upon ourselves. In any event, as a result of that 14th Amendment, then all of the people were construed to be U.S. citizens. And then as things evolved over a period of time and so forth, then, like for instance, through the use of a zip code. In any event, all of the people, who act like U.S. citizens are deemed to be employees of the United States government. And hence, they can be taxed. You see, the government cannot tax in the way that they do. They cannot tax people, but they can tax corporations. They can tax U.S. citizens because U.S. citizens are common stockholders of the corporation. They can be taxed by the priority stockholders of that corporation, and they do. So what we've worked on and tried to demonstrate in our seminars and so forth as to how to deal with that. You know, if you don't want to be a U.S. citizen, you don't have to be. And like that IRS agent told my friend, he said, if you don't want the problems, he said, stop using our number. So if you don't want the difficulties and problems with that, then you don't have to do it. If you don't want to, it's all purely voluntary. The problem is that people don't have the knowledge of the situation, so they know how to act differently. And so that's what I've tried to do as Solutions in Commerce is to elucidate that situation so that people understand it, and then give them various remedies if they choose that they don't want to act like that anymore. So that's the basis of it.
Beautiful. Hey, what about, in my case, my birth certificate, I have only my surname, Bonacci, in all caps, and Santo is with a capital S, but the rest is lowercase.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I think it is the same way in Canada and other places as well. But let me express it this way. Is that even though a name is written in upper and lowercase as opposed to all uppercase letters, it is still a title. Now, if you go back into Old England and study the feudal system, a title is granted by the king or whomever. The title is granted to land for the use. But for the use of that land, there are three things that are required. Number one, knight service or military service. Number two, rent for the use of it. Number three, taxes upon the product of that land. Now, if you use the family surname in conjunction with the given name, you are operating under a title. And in consequence of the use of that title from the king or whatever you want to call the potentate of where you're at, you still place yourself under those three requirements. And so I would not spend a great deal of time trying to deal with, the last name, the surname in all capital letters, and then the given names perhaps in upper and lower case, because it's actually a futile effort to do so. So look at the whole thing, from that perspective, and because again, the arguments, that about the difference in those two things, will take you nowhere. But again, the whole business there is to create an assumption of death. And so that's the main element that we have to deal with, is to replace the assumption with a fact.
Exactly. And of course, people can go to your website there if they want to further their knowledge in that, in dealing in commerce, solutions in commerce. Can you just repeat that website there for people who want to contact you and further their knowledge, please, Winston?
Sure, it'd be www.wssic.com, which stands for Winston Shrout Solutions in Commerce. And you can go to the website. Actually, we've started a YouTube site on that website where I give, short clips, short explanations about some of the things. And then if you want to go and look at the product list and ask questions about, the various things you see there, then certainly we would entertain those questions.
Wonderful. And at this point in time, I would like to ask our friend to join us and welcome Dean.
Hey, how's it going?
Very well, thanks.
2 nights in a row, I feel honored.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to admit I prodded Santos into this when I found out Winston was going to be on, because he's been one of the people for many, many years that when you hear people that have been in the movement for a long time talk about the fact that a lot of us up-and-comers are standing on the shoulders of giants, You guys are talking to one of them tonight, and I am definitely guilty of my own brand of hero worship when I talk to Winston Shrout. So
yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
I'm just a man, and I'm not an expert on anything. I am a student.
As we all are. Nonetheless, you're a student that's walked the walk, the talk, and has much good experience to share. Look, I think at this stage I'll pull in a caller. How would you like that, Winston?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. And we've got, caller with the number 6651, since he's been waiting for a long time. Are you there, caller?
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can hear me or not.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Can we have your name so that, we can...
Sure. My name's Robert.
Yep, thanks, Robert.
I got a question. Any way you could go over the Universal Postal Union's role in all of this?
Okay.
Were you able to hear that, Winston?
Yeah, if you could repeat the question, I didn't quite make that out.
If you could go over the Universal Postal Union's role in all of this with the UN.
How long do you want me to take on that?
Well, it just seems like everybody steers away from it.
Actually, the postal concept is independent of all these other corporates and governments and so forth. As an example of that, when the United States of America was being formulated, one of the prime movers in that, a man named Benjamin Franklin, who was certainly capable of being the president of the United States, chose not to be the president, but chose rather to be the postmaster general. Now, he realized that the postmaster general, in his proper perspective, was probably the most powerful individual in the nation at that point, because he controlled the communication. And so a government cannot function internally, it cannot function externally without the ability to communicate. And hence Benjamin Franklin chose to be in that power position rather than any other. So once you see, I'm not really remembering exactly when the various countries came together and formulated the Universal Postal Union, but again, that entity is independent of the governments that are on the planet. And so if you look at it from that perspective, perhaps it'll be enlightening to you.
So you
all of it's going to boil back down to Bern, Switzerland, to the Universal Postal Union then.
Certainly.
All
righty. Are you happy with that answer there, Robert?
Yeah, it just seems like everybody. It should be the biggest player in the game would be the UN and the Universal Postal Union behind the whole thing.
Yeah, there's just to further that a little bit. The Universal Postal Union, along with the various post offices of the various countries, have their own currency. For instance, here in the United States, we have United States Post Office money orders. And there's actually some people here in the States that operate exclusively with that currency and do not use Federal Reserve notes at all. And so it is possible. It's a little bit inconvenient, but the people who go that route are basically not becoming obliged to the Federal Reserve system through the use of Federal Reserve notes. And so, yeah, it's an interesting concept, a bit inconvenient to operate that way, but some people find the necessity to do so.
Good. Well, according to David Windmiller, the post office controls the court systems, or pays the Port Authority. And the Port Authority pays the judges.
Well, let me stop you right there. I don't want to get into David's technology and his comments and so forth because I don't understand completely his point of view on that. But aside from that, the explanation I've given so far would certainly show you the importance of the postal system. So if you want to, delve into David's thought process and technology, perhaps take that up with David a little bit. But in this particular explanation here, I don't think we need to delve that deeply into it. Put it that way.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. Much appreciate your questions. I do have other callers, but I do want to engage Dean. Wow, there's the music in the background. So we're going to engage Dean and Winston, after the break, and then we'll take some more callers. So thank you for that, and we'll be back in a few short minutes. Welcome back, friends. We are having a nice casual conversation with Winston Shrout and Dean Clifford, and dealing with solutions in commerce. Solutions in commerce. So, look, I'd be happy for you, Dean, to be able to engage with Winston. If you have any questions, I'm sure you have. I've got millions. I don't even know which direction to go.
Oh man, we hashed out a lot of questions I would have had this afternoon. Actually, it was a pleasure to actually kind of talk with him one-on-one, and instead of being a student like I was 7 years ago, and be able to hash some stuff out. But your listeners should all know that, if they haven't had a chance to listen to him live, they're missing out, because what a pleasure it is to sit and listen to such a polite gentleman with such a proper command of the English language and just a candor that just makes you want to sit and listen all night. I almost just want to sit back and listen instead of even speaking tonight. So yeah, I'll have to agree fully with all of that. Yeah. And me and another friend, another friend and I in Winnipeg here that have been teaming up for a couple of years now, learning and this particular individual has been learning everything he can about promissory notes, commerce. That's the angle he's taken. He has gone through most of Winston Shrout's material backwards and frontwards. And one thing we've noticed over the last number of years is every time we figure something out and that we are confused on, the first thing that always comes into our minds, we'll call each other and go, son of a bitch, Winston was right. Yeah, exactly. That's what I've found. And that hasn't failed once yet. So we don't even bother going over our stuff anymore now. When something doesn't jive, we don't go through Winston stuff anymore to see if something was wrong. We automatically go back and we know that we did something wrong if it doesn't jive with something that he said. So.
Well, let me interject something into that. Is that, again, I'm a student and I'm reporting what I have learned. So, don't attribute some of that stuff to me in particular, only as I have learned it and passed it along. I just try to use common sense and look at things from a realistic perspective, and then draw conclusions based on that. So, I appreciate your compliments and so forth, but everyone is just as capable as myself. It's just I got there first. That's all it amounts to.
There's no question. Let me add to that, actually, for people out there that are maybe feeling overwhelmed with this type of stuff, and this is even very basic, I might add. What I heard tonight, it's pretty beginner stuff. I was just telling Santos off the air there that I first was introduced to Winston actually about 7 years ago when he wasn't really widely known yet, and it was a little private 10-person one-on-one kind of thing. And I remember sitting there, and I was so confused. I had no idea what was going on. I remember thinking, I will never in my life figure out what the hell this guy is talking about. So it took a little while. Yeah, there you go. So it took a little while to figure it out, and then your brain starts to think differently, and then there you go. A couple of years later, you're like, okay, and then 7 years later, you have the pleasure of actually speaking to the person one-on-one, and you're speaking on a common footing. So I don't credit myself as being the smartest man on the planet. So anybody can figure this stuff out if they put effort and their heart into it.
I agree.
Absolutely. Time to go to another caller, and we've got Steve. Hello, Steve. Steve, are you there? All right. Well, your line's on. If you want to ask a question, I'll leave it open.
Hey, Santos,
Steve,
could I interject something here a moment about the questions?
Please do.
If it's at all possible, if the callers would formulate questions about what we've been speaking about, it would probably be more appropriate than going afield with other subjects where we don't have the time to completely explain those things. So if the callers' questions would kind of direct toward the subject matter that we've already discussed, it would certainly help the other listeners, I think, rather than going to other subjects.
Exactly. At this stage, I think Steve might be just listening in the background, which happens quite often. So, but you're quite happy to interject if you're listening there, Steve. I've got your line open. If you don't, I'll just mute it out in a few minutes. Alrighty. So, yeah, one question I have got for both of you guys is I would love to have your perspective on what's happening in Cyprus, because this is something that is now happening. There's a lot of stuff out there that I've seen already this morning. People are sending me information about what's happening and what they think it means. It's nasty. It's nasty for people to lose 10% of their savings, and they're desperately trying to go to the bank to withdraw their savings, but all of those transactions have been blocked. What have you got to say about that, please, Winston, if you can?
Well, let me give you some history that might be fundamental, and I think the peoples of the countries, that are suffering like this, perhaps might want to press some of these issues. And that was about almost 2 years ago now. Keith Scott asked me to participate with him in formulating an explanation in regards to money and financing. And I asked him, what is the intent of this? And he said, well, I intend to send this information to the financial ministers of some of the European Union countries. I said, well, okay. So anyway, we put together about a 20-page report in regards to some of these issues about money and banking and financing and so forth. And then Keith proceeded to send that information to some of the financial ministers. Now, the first one that he sent to was the financial minister of Ireland. And Ireland, of course, was having severe problems. In consequence of that information and new knowledge, perhaps, that the minister received, basically what he did was he went to the banks that had allegedly loaned money to Ireland. And what his position was basically, if you can prove that you loaned us any money, we will, in fact, gladly repay you. But if you cannot prove that you loaned us any money or where it came from, then we won't. And so, in essence, what he did was to remove the financial obligation of what would be referred to as a national debt. Now, Keith did send that information to some of the other European Union countries and so forth. And at first, it seemed like that some were prepared to act upon that in the same way that Ireland did, and probably, except for the way the election went in Greece, they would have followed that same example. In any event, the CEO of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, she got a copy of that somehow, and she looked at it, and she agreed with it. And at that point, she made certain corrections, if you will, in the way that the IMF dealt with some of these situations and so forth. Now, Cyprus, I don't think that Keith sent that information to Cyprus, but certainly these countries that are facing some of these difficulties and so forth, if in fact they would follow the example that was set in Ireland, I think they would be so much the better off.
Well, as far as I know, Ireland still haven't, come out of the woods with their problem as much as.
They have to correct their productivity and all those kind of things. But in that particular instance, they were able to deal with the bankers on that basis. See, you have to understand that, again, when these international banks supposedly loan money, it's only book money. The only true wealth on the planet, again, is the products of people's labors. And so all of these loans of money and so forth are simply fictitious, most of which have probably been created by illegal trading against the collateral accounts. So if the financial ministers of the countries would wake up to that realization, then they would say, hey, no more. You're destroying our country.
Wow. And what's your take there on Cyprus, Dean, yourself, if you don't mind?
Well, I'll take a non-technical approach on this one. I myself am curious as to how many times in modern human history the banks have to screw people over and steal their savings and their retirement before people learn not to keep their stuff in the banks. It's not a matter of who owes who what, and this is what happened behind the scenes, and, well, maybe they wouldn't have stolen the money if this happened and everything else. Don't put your money there. How many times do you have to have your gas siphoned out of your truck before you go and you get a locking gas cap? This isn't rocket science. Just don't put it in there anymore. Look after your own retirement, right? Most of these people have savings and they have bad credit card debts and mortgages on their homes. Why is your money in the bank if you have credit card debt and mortgages on your homes? Pay the stuff off and you wouldn't have to worry about it no more. Keep your stuff out of there. You should be using banks to exchange checks for cash and then put the money somewhere else. And then these banks wouldn't have the power they have in the first place.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, they can take 10% of mine. They won't get rich on that. Because that's all I use. That's the only reason I use my bank, for that reason that you have already mentioned. So,
remember the definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different result.
Yep. And then what was it? Within 3 months, probably, of the great stock market crash there in '29, when they seized everybody's lock boxes in the banks there and took all their jewelry and their coins and anything else that was being kept safe in there, and they just stole it all. People were probably using safety security boxes again within a month of that happening.
Yeah, insanity.
That is insanity, yes. So you almost find it hard to feel bad for these people because they just don't learn their lesson.
Yeah.
Wow. Very true. Very well said. So the direction for we the people, Winston, we were speaking with Dean yesterday about how nice it would be if we were all united. There's a lot of groups popping up, and they've all got something to add. And because they're not perfect, they also don't add in the sense that some of their things probably don't suit everybody. But going forward, how can we unite all these groups so that we have something better to offer the unawakened ones, perhaps, that don't realise that there is an alternative to this rotten system? Can you speak to that?
Yes. I'll give you my experience. Probably all of these various ones who are working toward a common goal should not organize. They should not unite on the basis that once you create an organization, it will immediately be infiltrated. And so, in my opinion, with the various ones that are working, towards the same goal, I would suggest that they remain independent so they do not become infiltrated.
Beautiful. But how can perhaps we strengthen that so that there is more, harmonious thinking, harmonious...
Again, people should not depend on Winston. They shouldn't depend on Santos or Dean or anybody else. We're simply educating and trying to bring these things to people's attention so they can act for themselves. So the goal then, if somebody wants to become independent or want to act in the capacity of a sovereign or whatever, then they need to do it on their own. And then, once they become solid, once they get into that position, then they can work with others to that goal. Now, there has been some criticism of the various ones that are trying to bring these things out into the open so that people can learn those things. And perhaps that criticism is based upon the fact that some of those entities have not reached as far into the subject matter as perhaps another group or entity and so forth. But at the very least, then that information at whatever level is being brought into public awareness so that people can see it.
Exactly. Beautifully. And we're just about to go to a break, Winston, so there's the music in the background. And, friends, we have one more segment after the break. Welcome back, friends. We are on American Freedom Radio with special guest Winston Shrout. And we also have Dean Clifford from yesterday joining us, popping in to join in with us. Appreciate your answer there, Winston. Yes, I would say it all boils down to know who you are and learn for yourself how it is that you are going to free yourself from all the assumptions and presumptions. And Dean and Winston and everybody else are only students in the same path who have some good things to offer and some solutions. And please don't go making anyone a guru, but look into it for yourself. The information shared by Winston and myself is there just to show folks what we are doing. Because the worst thing that can happen, Winston, I'm sure you're familiar with this, and Dean spoke about it yesterday on the show, is when someone says, oh, well, I went into court and I did exactly what you said and everything and it didn't work. Well, you thought you did what I said, is usually the case. Wouldn't you say?
And then when you get them to explain what they actually did, by the time the story actually comes out, it turns out they did absolutely nothing that you tried to help them with, and then they're left saying, "Oh yeah, I guess I didn't do it even close to what I was supposed to do." It's like, yeah, but that's the same story here from a lot of people, but. I don't hear much of that anymore. Actually, I get a lot of emails from people that say, oh, man, I went in there and I did this and I did this, and it went exactly the way you said it was, and I walked out and it's done. And it's like, okay, those stories are starting to get more common now. That's perfect.
Beautiful. And what's your experience with that, Winston? Have we lost Winston?
Uh-oh.
Oh. Rightio. Okay, well, interesting. I hope the board's onto that so we can call him back. But I'm sure he's, he did stipulate there in the last break that that's not his idea of having any followers. He just is sharing what he does, and that's the wise way to go. Winston, when you do come back on, just come straight back through. So that's strange, Dean. I don't know how that happens because that was a phone call, right? He was on the phone, not on Skype. I can understand that happening on Skype. That, sometimes we do have, weak lines. But anyway, yeah. What would you say about uniting, Dean? I tend to think that we need to have some sort of organism, not so much an organisation as Winston did say, because they do get infiltrated. There's no doubt about that. That's why they're monitoring Facebook and all of these interfaces that we have on the internet and whatnot. But they monitor them because they don't want things to get out of hand, and so that they can infiltrate them. But what about an organism or a united front where we can share technologies and stand together so that we can offer something alternative to this system?
Yeah, I think people need to get away from the idea that there's like these groups that are forming that are like some sinister organization that the government must infiltrate to discover their true diabolical schemes that are going on behind the surface, when really all it is a bunch of people just getting together trying to figure out their human rights and how they're going to enforce it. Like, it's pretty sad to think that a government really needs to monitor and infiltrate groups like that in the first place. I don't think there's any fear of that. Guess what? If a government agent, an undercover cop, wants to come and infiltrate me to find out what we're doing, be my guest. You're going to find out a lot of people just talking about stuff they read in law books and trying to tell the truth and figure out how they're going to make this world a better place. Ooh, what are you going to do? Take notes and take me to court for trying to figure out how to make the world better? Oh, no, like that's really terrifying. So quit worrying about all these government people. And I remember when I first got into this years ago, long before I'd heard of Winston, when I first went to my first DTax Canada website there, Eldon Warman, and you were terrified that they were going to know you were even visiting that website, and you thought you had to disappear and go off the grid altogether and disappear from humanity. Otherwise, the government was going to hunt you down. You're going to wind up in a gas chamber somewhere. Like, it's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. And
yeah, I would have been assassinated years ago for all the stuff I post on Facebook.
Yeah, like, come on, that's exactly it. And actually, that's one of the things that I had to make a point of yesterday with a bunch of people. Some fellows I talked to down the States, some ladies and gentlemen down there, and other people that are so worried about this civil war that's coming, and the government's going to start rounding us up and killing us and everything else. And let me point this out. This is why I'm not worried about us forming organizations or forming our own little collectives, non-government organizations, micronations that have treaties together that we ban certain things that we know are just going to be used against us 2 generations from now to bring about the same problems we have right now. And I said to the person that was worried about the Civil War, and I've had a lot of conversations with people about this, and I try to look at this logically, and just think about this logically. If I wanted to go and kill somebody by smashing their head in with a lead pipe, would I call them every day for 2 weeks on the phone and say, I'm coming for you, man. Watch out. You better be watching your back because I got a lead pipe and I'm going to smash your head in? If I was actually going to do it, would I warn them about it? Would I tell them what I'm going to do? No, I would just sneak up behind them and bash their head in and kill them, and that'd be the end of it. Okay? Rapists do not torment their rape victim in advance and let them know they're about to be raped, okay? If the government was really going to do what they're doing, what people fear is going to happen, there's going to be a civil war, the government's stockpiling all these weapons, would they warn you? Would they be leaking information and making public broadcasts that they've just bought 11 billion rounds of hollow point ammunition? And that they got 30,000 Predator drones, and that now hunting humans is legal. Ooh, they've made a declaration, hunting humans is legal, so you better watch out, you freedom people out there, because if we are monitoring you and you're part of a website or an organization, it's going to be legal to hunt you next. Would they be rolling around in these what do they call them? Those troop transport armored personnel carriers that they got motoring around Detroit and stuff like that right now? Basically, they're going out of their way to make it look like this is what they're going to do if people even dare poke their heads up and try to say something. That is not what people do if they're about to launch an attack on an entire country, okay? At that point, it's a bluff. It's a bluff.
Absolutely. It's fear-mongering, same old tool that they've always generated. Big Brother's scary.
If you are gearing up to massacre 300 million people that live in a nation full of the most heavily armed people on this planet, you do not announce your plans in advance to give them time to prepare and cause gun sales to go for the roof. You just do it. You plan in secret, but they're broadcasting this alleged mass arrest and mass, we've got all the death camps are there, and we got these, we're going to kill it. We've got 11 billion rounds of ammunition. We're coming for you. You don't advertise that. You just do it, and that's how you know that they're full of it. That's how you know it's nonsense. It's garbage. They're scared because we're waking up.
Of course, and look at this other angle. I mean, they have spent millions of dollars setting up a commerce system where the more consumers there are, the richer they get. Like, they're going to kill those consumers and then, shut down Walmart and GM Motors and all of their industry? What are they going to do? Grow some new consumers?
That's just it. It's nonsense. Well, actually, I could actually make a counter-argument to that and say that technology has gotten to the point where most people really aren't necessary and that they've already got what they perceive to be all the money in the world, so commerce really doesn't matter to them at this point anyways. So I could argue the contrary to that really 90% of humanity probably really doesn't need to be here to suit their purposes. But again, if that was your plan and you were going to carry out some kind of a coup and massacre hundreds of millions of people, you would never announce your plans in advance, especially not a decade in advance, and allow people to be stockpiling guns for the next decade. Like, it's ludicrous to think that. That's why I think even stockpiling guns is a ludicrous idea for Americans who think they have to get ready to go to war with their own government. It's nonsense. If anything, the 500 people at the very top of this are finally just going to bug out one day, and they're going to fly off to whatever island they bought somewhere on the other side of the planet in friggin' Bali or something, and just leave the place in a shambles, and we'll just have to rebuild, right? That's it.
Exactly. Yeah, too true. You just have to think about it. Just go through the thinking process, friends. Fear is the most valuable tool. Subject people in fear. As Machiavelli wrote 500 years ago, of course, he was a Republican and a free man, but he did write his Prince and directed his advice to anyone who would wish to implement a principality. And a principality is all about that, fear. The prince must be feared. And here we are at the end of the show. I would like to thank Winston. I hope you're listening there in the background. But sorry that you dropped off. I don't know how that happened. But sincerest thanks for joining us, Winston. And you too, Dean. And we'll have you back soon, I'm sure, because you've got some things you're going to share with everybody.
Big things coming, my friend. Big things.
Good on you, brother. Keep up the good work. We definitely love you both. And so, friends, stay tuned next week for more great guests on American Freedom Radio. All the best. Bye-bye.